Okay, in this video, I'm going to talk about the tragic death of Austin Metcalf and what the reaction of the internet says about his death. So anyway, for those of you who've been living under a rock or probably just haven't been paying attention to the news, Austin Metcalf was a young man who was just ruthlessly stabbed during a dispute at the age of 17. Metcalf was white and his assailant was black. I want to point this out because I want to let people know I'm not really afraid to point these things out. I'm not trying to hide anything. His death was tragic, and the guy who killed him should be punished for it severely. But while his death is tragic, it undeniably is, he deserves justice. He undeniably deserves justice. And I do not want to bring the center of the conversation away from a man who had a very bright future and who deserves justice and who did nothing wrong. This issue should be centered around him and remembering his life and legacy and what could have been. It's a tragic tale of a young man whose life was cut short. What I want to draw attention to is the reaction to his death, especially by the right wing. The right wing, they need to construct a narrative that supports their victimhood. The right wing needs to feel like they are victims. They absolutely need to feel like they have to make this racial. The reason why, because white males, the reason why a lot of this is happening, the internet is reacting this way, and they're trying to make this situation racial, is because white males have constructed this persecution narrative around themselves over the last over 10 years now. It's a massive persecution narrative that is very, very dangerous because it can easily skew our perception of reality. This is especially the case because this is especially dangerous because whites are currently going through the process of becoming a numerical minority in the United States. And whenever a shift like this happens, where a dominant group loses power, you run the risk of experiencing violence. Austin's father has come out and said it's not a race problem, it's a people problem. It's a human being problem, which is very responsible for him to say. He could or could not believe that, and I would be extremely, extremely sympathetic to him if he was extremely, extremely angry, not at people, but at black people. I'll be extremely, extremely sympathetic to it. And that might be his true beliefs. I don't know, but that's what he's come out and said. He seems to be genuine. And even if it wasn't genuine, I would still be pretty sympathetic to him. After all, he just lost his son. But what's fascinating to me is how the right wing has to construct these narratives around themselves. Like Anthony Cumia, who is a right-wing personality who was fired from the Opie and Anthony radio show for his racial insensitivity. He wrote a post saying, after his father said it's a human being problem, it's a case of a human being making a bad choice, Anthony Cumia said, what a repugnant display of white guilt. Disgusting. Notice how nowhere in this conversation did Austin's father say the boy shouldn't be punished, or that he was ashamed of being white, or that he wishes the assailant wasn't black. He says it was a people problem, a human being problem. Opie is projecting this white guilt narrative onto him, which there seems to be no indication that this is the case. Of course, the death of Austin is very, very tragic, and his father deserves justice, and Austin deserves justice. But these right-wingers, it's like, what this exposes is just how fictional their persecution narrative is, how artificial it is. They need to construct this narrative that in reality simply doesn't exist. Elijah Schaefer, another right-wing influencer, says, "Forced integration has been a complete failure. We want our cities back. With the current liberal world order, we will never feel safe again." And he shows a picture of the assailant of Austin, who is black, holding up a gun and giving the middle finger. He intentionally crops the photo, of course, that shows that the assailant was not necessarily opposed to white people. He was close friends with white people. Obviously, this was not racially motivated. The boy could have been mentally ill for all we know. I mean, I don't want to use that trope, because right wingers, whenever a white male commits a violent crime, they try to use a mental health cop out. But he could have been mentally ill. So there are a lot of other things that could have happened other than race. This isn't like Dylan Roof, where he's praising Rhodesia. He's not exactly praising Zimbabwe and praising the revolutionaries in South Africa and Nelson Mandela and stuff. No, the radical Nelson Mandela of his youth. No, this is a guy who was around whites, who hung around whites, who seems to be well integrated into American society, who seems to be well accustomed to white society, to polite white society. So these guys are constructing this narrative. It's very, very dangerous, because these narratives, this white persecution narrative, this white anxiety, this white male angst, is taking a hold over American politics, and it can be very, very dangerous. It's like lighting a match in a room filled with with flammable fumes in there. Things should go off at any minute now. So this references to another video I did about how a big problem in the 21st century is going to be, how do we deal with these people who exploit freedom of speech? Of course, freedom of speech exists to protect the speech that we might not agree with, and it's made to protect people who could be perceived as being persecuted. But what if the person who alleges they're persecuted are the dominant group, and the persecution narrative is completely fictitious? How do we deal with the free speech issue then?